December 25th, 2005. I awoke on Christmas morning to one of the best presents that I could ask for at the time. It was a brand new Gameboy SP and Pokemon Fire Red. Ever since that day, I've been constantly going back to these games and playing on the Game Boy. It's mostly just due to Pokemon, but I still really enjoy those games and has a special place in my heart. Little did I know at the time that I would still be playing these games today, almost 20 years later, and back then I would really have no idea how much of a big impact that it's had on my life so far. Despite this being probably my favorite gaming device, it has some issues. These Game Boys were getting pretty old, the batteries were really running dry, and now that we have new devices like the Switch or even the DS Lite or anything like that, it made me really realize how bad the screens were on the original Game Boys. A few months ago it was brought to my attention that there's actually a pretty big modding community for this. I watched a bunch of videos, learned more about the topic, and eventually, made my way to a website and started purchasing some stuff. In this video, I do want to discuss my experience modding the Game Boy for the first time, and some things I wish I paid a little bit more attention to before, actually going in and ripping my old Game Boy apart. I think these videos on YouTube make it seem super chill and easy, however, it wasn't incredibly simple for me. I'm not saying it's actually really challenging, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from actually attempting to do it themselves. I just want to talk about some more boring aspects in those videos that I think were overlooked. My first purchase included buying the IPS screen. This is usually the thing people are going to buy first because it's just going to make the biggest impact on your gaming experience. I also bought some buttons, some hinges, a USB charger. It's pretty awesome Groudon looking shell. I also had to buy some tools like this Y-tip and like a very small Phillips head. These screws are small, so you really need special tools to get the job done. One thing I wish I did buy was a better battery. I don't know why I didn't really include it in the purchase, but I would definitely do so next time. It's not really that expensive either. The IPS screen ran me about $70, which is definitely the most expensive item. However, again, it's the most lethal. Getting into the actual disassembly and assembly of the Game Boy, the first major problem I had was disassembling the actual case. These screws are really small, and I had a lot of problems actually unscrewing this. I ended up stripping the screws really easily, and I didn't really even notice that I was doing so. I wasn't even applying that much pressure. I was wary going into this disassembly that these screws were small and probably going to strip, but however, I very underestimated how easily they were going to do so. One of the things I might have wished I bought instead of this screwdriver, these screwdrivers, was buying one with a little bit larger handle and maybe a little bit longer. I think having that extra leverage can really help maybe not strip the screws and get a little bit more leverage. Ultimately though, these screws are really small and I think it's very easy to mess up. I ended up having to cut the back shell off this Game Boy and it did some pretty good damage, however I eventually did get it off. It was a pretty sad day ripping apart one of the first Game Boys I ever had, but I had to, I had to do this upgrade. I've already come this far. Not only are there some screws on the back shell to open up to the motherboard, but there's also very small screws near the screen. Getting to these screws is also a little bit challenging because these are very small buttons here. You need a very, very fine, sharp object to pry these open without having to damage them. I managed to do it with the multi-tool with the knife portion, however I do recommend getting something even more finer. You can kind of see that I did damage them a little bit on mine, however it's not absolutely terrible. I ended up stripping these screws too when there was really nothing I could do. Maybe I'm just a really bad screwdriver person. However, I did work in a machine shop for several months and man, these I don't know about these screws, man. If I was designing anything, I would not use these microscopic screws to hold like anything in place. Next thing I want to talk about are the springs on these bumpers. So, I mean, maybe I'll show it in the video, but I really don't want to take apart my Game Boy, but there's very small springs in here, and I, for the life of me, did not understand how they fit in there. And I was very tempted to not watch a video because it was a simple spring and it was a very simple device. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to understand this. After about 10 minutes, I was able to actually figure it out. But yeah, there's a little trick to this, but maybe before you disassemble that spring, if you do decide to replace the hinges, just double check that you understand how it works. Let's talk about these hinges right here too. These were very, very frustrating. I ended up ordering new hinges because I wasn't really aware if I even needed them, and if I heard that when you take them out, they usually break. So when I eventually did take my old ones out of this original Game Boy, I ended up keeping them and they didn't break, which was good because I needed them for this. However, the hinges that I did buy, I tried to put them into the Game Boy and they were just not budging. I was aware that the amount of force I would need to put these hinges in was a lot. Like, I understood that. However, I mean, I was using my multi-tool with like the pliers section. I was gripping that like down and I was like using the table and using my entire body weight and force, and it was like barely budging. It eventually somehow popped in. I have no idea. I was pretty certain that the actual like casing was going to break before that hinge got in. So, I mean, if you feel like you're using too much force on this, you're probably not. I also did hear that there are left and right hinges. Maybe I had the wrong one in the wrong area. However, there's no way to indicate which one's left, which one's right. I also ordered the hinges online and they didn't specify either or, like which is which. I'm not sure exactly why the hinges would be completely different, but regardless, the hinges, you got to use a lot of force. Let's move on to the shell. So you see I bought this Groudon shell, but you might be asking, well, why isn't it on the Game Boy? Well, this back shell is pretty bad in my opinion, actually. These screws up here on the top by the screen, they don't thread at all. Maybe I'll show a video, but I'm trying to like screw it in and there's no way that screw is getting in there. I'm not even sure that there's any threading for that screw to get in. Maybe I have to actually put the threading in when I screw it, like the plastic may be malleable enough to actually make that happen. However, the screwdriver that I have doesn't allow me to do that. The only thing that happens if I apply too much force is the screw strips. That's it. So there's that like kind of dynamic where you need the screw, or you need to apply enough force to the screwdriver to get the screw to probably thread itself. But if you do that, it's just going to strip. So I'm not really sure what I could have done there. One thing I would actually kind of recommend, there is enough material on here where if you do have some sort of like tapper or something, you can actually tap your own screws and probably put a little bit bigger screws in there. You might need to go out, buy the tapper, buy different screws and actually maybe drill out the other side of the casing just to have the screw fit. You might be asking yourself too, well, if you're having so many problems with the screws and you stripped all the screws, what is holding your Game Boy together? And that, I will say, is absolutely nothing. There's three screws actually in this entire Game Boy that's actually being held. The battery, and we got these two down here. All the other screws I was unable to put in. You can see how easily it just pops right off. That's okay for me. I mean, I'm not bringing this Game Boy around anywhere. I'm just using it for video purposes. But yeah, there are no screws in this right now, which is, I guess, concerning, but it's fine. If there's any like little bit of advice I would recommend here, just don't put those screws in unless you somehow get a little lucky or they work for you, because they didn't work for me. So any other way or any other means of holding this Game Boy together I'm after, other than using those screws. I do not like those screws and they do not like me. Getting back to the back shell, you can see here that I actually had to cut these open, and this is because they didn't fit the IPS screen because it's a little bit larger. So what you have to do is you have to take this like tool and you got to cut away some material in order for the screen to fit. This was the part that was most concerning for me. It ended up being pretty easy. It just was very time consuming. One thing I want to point out is cutting this Groudon shell was very easy. Cutting the original Game Boy casing was very hard because the plastic is much thicker. I was told that if I did dip the material inside of a little bit not boiling, but warm water, it would help soften up the plastic. I think that makes sense. However, I did not do that and confirm it. But if you're having trouble chipping away at this material, you might want to try doing that for a little bit, soaking the material in just a little bit of warmer water. Just want to quickly kind of recap some of the things I mentioned. I would definitely have gotten a bigger screwdriver. I do think it might have given me a little bit more leverage to probably pry the screws or get the screws out, but in general, the screws are just so small and annoying to deal with. And once they're stripped, it's pretty much over. You got to find another way to get that out. Another thing to mention is this screen is beautiful and fingerprints stay on it for a while. I accidentally touched the screen and I'm having a very hard time taking out the little stain that I made. I do have a like special cloth to do so, but it's still not really working. Just be careful to not touching the screen. If you do want to avoid all these potential problems, you could just go to eBay and buy a pre-modded Game Boy already. Now I know part of the experience and the fun is doing the mod yourself. I thought the same thing. I thought it'd be kind of a fun little project I would do in a few hours and have a little good time, put on some music and chill. But it ended up being kind of a headache and annoying. Like it took like an hour just to cut the material away, and the screws were just frustrating. The experience I envisioned and the experience that I got from the mod itself was kind of, I guess, underwhelming. I don't want to discourage anyone from actually doing it themselves. I think it could be a lot of fun. I'm just saying that it's something worth considering. With all that being said, though, I really love this new screen. It's honestly so beautiful. I'm really happy I did buy it. It's just I kind of had to destroy something memorable in the process. But I guess like in the show Full Metal Alchemist, in order to gain something, you first have to sacrifice something else. I do want to talk about my Game Boy goals. It mostly has to do with Pokemon, but I think you'll enjoy it a little bit. I'm almost done completing a complete Fire Red, Leaf Green, I guess Ruby Sapphire, all that Pokedex. I just need Ho-Oh from Coliseum, and the dog, so 4 more Pokemon. I am almost done playing Coliseum. I just have it on the back burner. Once that's done, I'll transfer those over and the Pokedex will be complete. I do need the event Pokemon, and that will be a separate project in itself. If I do that, probably within the next like 5 years, I'll make some videos about that too. Still going to continue my shiny hunting journeys. There's still some shinies that I really want to get in the Gen 3 games. I've also been working on my Battle Frontier Pokemon that I'm going to be using, trying to get some of those medals and badges and stuff. I need to order a new battery too and put them in the Game Boy so I can actually prolong my gaming experience without having it plugged in. I do also want an all black Game Boy with the IPS screen, maybe with screws too. I do want the thing to be put together, but yeah, a nice slick all black would be super cool. I'm very happy that we have the resources to take these older games or gaming devices and kind of upgrade them to more modern times. Like I mentioned before, the screen was getting really dull and hard to pick up on a camera. However, putting this new screen in, it really shines when I try to make some videos. I'm very thankful. The new screen beautifully displays the games with more colors and depth that I never thought I would see. It is almost as if I'm playing the games for the first time. Hopefully enjoyed the video and my experience. Also hope you guys are getting out there and playing this old gaming device because it's truly a nostalgic one. Take care.